A pleasant day, everyone. My name is Fatima B. Valles, and I will be presenting qualitative research. Qualitative research is a multi-method in focus involving an interpretive, naturalistic approach to its subject matter. This means that qualitative researchers study things in their natural settings, attempting to make sense of or interpret phenomena in terms of the meanings people bring to them. The researcher's role is to gain a holistic or integrated overview of the study, including the perceptions of the participants. I have here a comparison on the conceptual and the methodological aspect of qualitative and quantitative research. So, in qualitative research, it is concerned with understanding human behavior from the informant's perspective. It assumes a dynamic and negotiated reality, while in quantitative research, it is concerned with discovering facts about social phenomena. It assumes a fixed and measurable reality. In the methodological perspective, qualitative research data are collected through participant observation and interviews. Data are analyzed by themes from descriptions by informants, and data are reported in the language of the informant. While in the quantitative research, data are collected through measuring things. Data are analyzed through numerical comparisons and statistical inferences, and data are reported through statistical analysis. So, qualitative research is used to understand how people experience the world. While there are many approaches to qualitative research, they tend to be flexible and focus on retaining rich meaning when interpreting data. So I have here the different research approaches in qualitative studies. So first is case study. It studies a specific bounded system, example, a person or institution. Next is ethnography. It explores the nature of a specific social phenomenon, often using a small number of cases. Next is ethnomethodology. It investigates people's everyday procedures for creating and managing a sense of objective reality. Another approach is phenomenology, which explores how people's taken for granted world is experienced and how structures of consciousness apprehend the world. Next approach is the grounded theory. Uses the interplay between analysis and data collection to produce theory. The next approach is the participatory action research. It implies an effort on the part of people to understand the role of knowledge as a significant instrument of power and control. The next approach is narrative analysis. So, the analysis of a chronologically told story exploring how various elements are sequenced. Next is the cultural studies. So, the study of a complex web of social customs, values, and expectations that affect our ways of working. And we also have general studies. So it explores the process of construction and differentiation of gender and particularly gender inequality. So the results of qualitative strategies provide a deep understanding of how people perceive their social realities and in consequence how they act within the social world. A researcher has several methods for collecting data, ranging from interview to direct observation to the analysis of artifacts, documents, and cultural records to the use of visual materials or personal experience. So I have here 5 methods in qualitative data collection. So let us discuss first interview. So interviews are different from questionnaires as they involve social interaction. So it can be structured, unstructured, or focus group interviews. Interviews are useful for follow up, probing questions. And then researchers can ask different types of questions, which in turn generate different types of data. So, interviews differ from questionnaires in a sense that researchers need training in how to interview, which is costly. A good example of an interview would be unstructured interviews, which could generate qualitative data through the use of open questions. So this allows the respondents to talk in some depth, choosing their own words. This helps the researcher develop a real sense of a person's understanding of a question, of a situation rather. So, unstructured interviews, on the other hand, are sometimes referred to as discovery and interviews and are more likely a guided conservation than a strict structured interview. So, they are sometimes called informal interviews. The next method in data collection for qualitative research is observation. So, observation or watching what people do would seem to be an obvious method of carrying out research. So, data collected is in natural field settings. It can be overt or covert. So observations can also, as I mentioned, overt or covert. Overt means the participants know they are being studied. So the participants are aware that they are subject or part of a research study. While covert or undisclosed observation, so the researcher keeps his real identity a secret from the research subjects, acting as a genuine member of the group. So, observation can involve participation by the researcher in setting, event, or non participation. The next method of data collection is survey. Distributing open-ended questions to produce long-form written typed answers. Surveys provide a high level of general capability in representing a large population. So due to the usual huge number of people who answer survey, the data being gathered possess a better description of the relative characteristics of the general population involved in the study. So it results to a broad range of data which can be collected, such as the attitudes, the opinions, the beliefs, behaviors, and values of the respondents. Another method of qualitative data collection is using visual sources. So qualitative data could be much more than just words or text. Another method of which is using photographs, film, audio, or video recordings, and the like. So it is good for documenting people's lifestyle, living, and working conditions. But the subject's behavior may change in front of the camera. And the last method in data collection for qualitative research is through the use of unobtrusive measures. So it includes documents such as reports, articles, business plans, contract, websites, and other non-reactive data. Qualitative research is an endlessly creative and interpretative process. The researcher does not just leave the field with mountains of empirical data and then easily write up his or her findings. So, as a researcher, there are several or specific steps in data analysis. So, most types of qualitative data analysis are the following. First is to prepare and organize your data. So this may mean transcribing interviews or typing up field notes. The second step is to review and explore your data. It means that you should examine the data for patterns or repeated ideas that emerge. The next step is to develop a data coding system. So, based on your initial ideas, you should establish a set of codes that you can apply to categorize your data. So, the fourth step is to assign codes to the data. So, for example, in qualitative survey analysis, this may mean going through each participant's responses and tagging them with codes in a spreadsheet. So as you go through your data, you can create new codes to add to your system if necessary. So the last step is to identify recurring themes. So this means you should link codes together into cohesive overarching themes. So there are several specific approaches to analyzing qualitative data. Although these methods share similar processes, they emphasize different concepts. So we have here the content analysis, the thematic analysis, textual analysis, and the discourse analysis. Content analysis is used to describe and categorize common words, phrases, and ideas in qualitative data. So, for an example, a market researcher could perform content analysis to find out what kind of language is used in descriptions of a therapeutic application. The next analysis is the thematic analysis. It is used to identify and interpret patterns and themes in qualitative data. An example of this is that a psychologist could apply thematic analysis to travel blogs to explore how tourism shapes self-identity. So the next type of qualitative data analysis is textual analysis. It is used to examine the content, structure, and design of text. So our keyword here is the text or text. So for an example of this is that a media researcher could use textual analysis to understand how news coverage of celebrities has changed in the past decade. And last type of analysis is the discourse analysis. It is used to study communication and how language is used to achieve effects in specific context. So an example is that a political scientist could use discourse analysis to study how politicians generate trust in election campaigns. Moving forward, we have three broad approaches or the sampling strategies for qualitative research. We have theoretical sampling, we have convenience sampling, and purposive sampling. So, in our previous discussions, we have learned that sample is any part of a population that it represents a population. For example, an example of these are students, teachers, young learners, and the like. So we also learned that sampling is the process of selecting these individuals. Individuals. So you might ask, what is the appropriate sample size for a qualitative research? So the answer is it depends on the size that adequately answers the research question. For a single research question or detailed study, a single sample will do. While for a complex research question, for complex research questions, larger samples are applicable. So in qualitative research, there are various sampling techniques. So let's first discuss theoretical sampling. So theoretical sampling is the process of data collection for generating theory. So the researcher jointly collects, codes, and analyzes data and decides what data to collect next and where to find them in order to develop his or her theory as it emerges. So it is an ongoing process rather than a distinct and single stage. So the next sampling strategy is convenience sampling. A convenience sample simply includes the individuals who happen to be most accessible to the researcher. So convenience sampling is an easy and an inexpensive way to gather initial data, but there is no way to tell if the sample is a representative of the population. So it can produce a generalizable results. So it may result in a poor quality data and lacks intellectual credibility. So the third sampling strategy is the purposive sampling. It is also known as judgment sampling. It involves the researcher using their expertise to select a sample that is most useful to the purposes of the research. So these research questions provide guidelines as to what categories of people or whatever the unit of analysis is need to be the focus of attention and therefore sampled. So let's move forward to the advantages of qualitative research. Qualitative research often tries to preserve the voice and perspective of participants and can be adjusted as new research questions arise. So, qualitative research is good for first, flexibility. So, the data collection and analysis process can be adapted as new ideas or patterns emerge. They are not rigidly decided beforehand. The second advantage is natural settings. So, data collection occurs in real world contexts or in naturalistic ways. The third advantage is the meaningful insights. So, detailed descriptions of people's experiences, feelings, and perceptions can be used in designing, testing, or improving systems or products. So, the fourth advantage is the generation of new ideas. So, open ended responses mean that researchers can uncover novel problems or opportunities that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So, researchers must also consider the practical and theoretical limitations or disadvantages in analyzing and interpreting their data. So, qualitative research suffers from first, first is unreliability, which means that the real world setting often makes qualitative research unreliable because of uncontrolled factors that affect the data. The second disadvantage or limitation is subjectivity. Due to the researcher's primary role in analyzing and interpreting data, qualitative research cannot be replicated. The researcher decides what is important and what is irrelevant in data analysis. So interpretations of the same data can vary greatly. The third disadvantage is the limited generalizability. So small samples are often used to gather detailed data about specific contexts. Despite rigorous analysis procedures, it is difficult to draw generalizable conclusions because the data may be biased and unrepresentative of the wider population. And lastly, labor extensive. Although software can be used to manage and record large amounts of text, data analysis often has to be checked or performed manually. So I think that would be the end of my report, and thank you everyone for patiently watching.